Breaking news in a CBS Sports HQ. The Orlando Magic are on the clock. The Magic now hold the top pick in this June's NBA draft. Behind the Magic sit the Thunder, the Rockets, and the Kings in that order. Sacramento was your biggest mover upward into a top 4 pick, but as for the top team, the Magic will select first overall for the first time since 2004 when they selected Dwight Howard with the number 1 pick. And there's a look at your top 14 picks in this upcoming June's NBA draft. The ping pong balls have come to rest. It's officially time to mock it up. And for that, we sail to CBS senior hoops writer Gary Parrish alongside the coach Avery Johnson. Gentlemen, let's get right to it. Top overall pick belongs to the Orlando Magic, and if history tells us, it's going to be a heck of a player there heading to Orlando. GP, lead us off. Who goes 1?
Listen, this is going to be debated intensely for the coming days and weeks and perhaps even months. And reasonable minds could disagree on this, whether it should be Chet Holmgren, Paolo Banchero, Jabari Smith, or perhaps even Jaden Ivey. But ultimately, if I'm selecting for Orlando, I'm taking Chet Holmgren. He's such a unique prospect and somebody who I believe has the highest ceiling. He's a legitimate 7-foot rim protector who on the offensive end can comfortably bounce it on the perimeter, comfortably play make. He can make shots at a high percentage from three-point range. I recognize that there are some concerns about his frame, but for me, people focusing too much on what he's not, you miss everything that he is. This is similar to what some people did with Luka Doncic a few years ago as he was getting ready to enter the NBA draft. He was operating at an unprecedented level in Europe, and yet some people question the athleticism, question whether he'd be able to get those shots against NBA athletes. And he got to the NBA, and you know how that story has gone. He's had no problems whatsoever. I don't think Chet Holmgren will have problems either. I think he's going to be the best player from this draft, and that's why I would take him number 1.
Well, with Luka's situation, it's a little bit different because he's got the ball in his hands. He's a point guard. He initiates the offense. Chet obviously is going to depend on other guards getting him the ball. But I agree with Gary. He's an outstanding talent. This young man, can play from the three-point line in. He does a nice job of holding his own, even with his frail frame in terms of blocking shots around the basket. But, when you think about guys like Jokic from Denver, who basically was exposed from a defensive pick and roll standpoint out on the perimeter, I think that's going to be something that Chet's got to improve, trying to guard those guys, smaller players coming off those pick and rolls when teams downsize. And is he going to have the ability to put the ball on the floor against smaller players? But this young man is an outstanding, talented player, very coachable. And heard nothing but positives about him. And if he were to go number 1, Orlando obviously would be getting an outstanding player.
Spoken like a true coach. Don't bring me a problem. Bring me a solution. Perhaps Chet is that solution for the Magic guys. GP sitting at number 2, the Thunder, who just have a bevy of picks coming up over the next half decade. A lot of them first-round picks as well. But here they will pick number 2 as they try and right the ship. Who do they add to the roster in this coming draft?
I think it should be Paolo Banchero out of Duke. This is a guy who, for much of the past couple of years, I thought would be the number 1 pick in the 2022 NBA draft. And he still might be. He's going to be in that conversation. But I can't imagine him going outside of the top 3. And if Holmgren is off the board at 1, I take Banchero at 2. He's probably the safest option, and that's not why I would take him, because he also has tremendous upside and potential. But of the guys being considered for the first overall pick, he's probably the safest option because he's big and strong and skilled. Maybe not an A-plus athlete, but there aren't many questions about whether he's going to be able to flourish in the NBA. And right from the jump, I think you could throw him in an NBA game tonight and he would be fine, given the body that he's going to enter that league with and the skill set he'll enter that league with. And for an Oklahoma City franchise that is obviously rebuilding and already has, some interesting young pieces, most notably Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, adding a talent, the level of Banchero to the franchise. would obviously be a move in the right direction.
I agree with Gary with this pick. Banchero at the number 2 spot. Yes, size, athleticism. Played against some, better talent than Chet did in the ACC, even though this overall was a down year for the ACC. But going up against those boys from North Carolina, 3 times this year, I think that's going to bode well for him in his transition. But this kid has that LeBron-type body. I think I agree with Parrish because he can play from day one. This kid is an NBA starter. Whatever position, it doesn't matter. He can walk in from day one. This kid, barring any injuries, he's an 82-game-a-year player with that body and that physicality, and he can impose his will on both ends of the floor. He's going to be fine defensively. Sure, he's got to learn some of the communication and some of the terminology from his new NBA system, but I really like Banchero here. I didn't have Chet Holmgren going number 1, but we can talk about that in a minute.
No, we got Coach and the analyst here. We got GP doing the drafting, but that is Chet and Paolo off the board for those keeping track at home. Houston's a great place to live, guys. It's a great place to make a family, great place to grow up. Might not be the best place to play basketball right now, but with Chet and Paolo off the board, that does leave Jabari Smith there for the taking at number 3 by the Rockets. GP, is that where you're going?
That would have to be where the Rockets would take if he were still on the board. The truth is, Banchero, Holmgren, and Smith are going to come off the board in some order, probably 1, 2, and 3. So if you're Houston, you're actually in a spot where the pick almost gets made for you. That's a bit of an overstatement, I acknowledge. But it's a little bit like if you look at the draft a few years ago, the Grizzlies knew once Zion Williamson is off the board, we're taking Ja Morant. Similarly, Houston's going to know whichever 2 of the 3 come off the board of Chet Holmgren, Paolo Banchero, and Jabari Smith, we'll get the other one at 3. So the truth is, Houston will actually make the pick at number 3, obviously, but Orlando and Oklahoma City will determine who goes 3rd to the Houston Rockets. It'll be whichever of those 3 players those 2 franchises do not take.
Yeah, the Houston Rockets at the 3 spot. It's still a win for this franchise. This is a franchise that's 2 or 3 years away. And when you talk about Gary, Houston being a good place to live, I raised both of my kids there. Both of my kids were born in Houston. And that city really loves basketball. That was one of the teams that I played for during my career, even though it was only for a cup of coffee. But they really love basketball. With the change in ownership a couple of years back with Tillman Fertitta, he hasn't had some of the championship results as some of the previous Rockets owners have had. But this is a slow rebuild. How much time are they going to give Steven Silas? But again, if Jabari Smith is in this spot, even though I think he's going to be off the board, if it's Jabari Smith, they're going to land a phenomenal player that really complements Green, being that other wing player that can stretch the floor, play inside and out, played in a tough SEC. I had this kid early in the season for a road game at St. Louis. As we shared when Tim Dahl was on with us. So I've had a front row seat to really see how good this kid is and what a high ceiling that he's going to have in the NBA.
All right, let's talk about our biggest mover, the Sacramento Kings, into that 4 spot. They had a 7.5% chance to win the lottery outright. They don't do that, but it was either 1 through 4 or 7 through 11, and they do get the better end of that deal, Gary. With those 3 off the board, who's next to go at number 4?
I'm taking Jaden Ivey out of Purdue, and I recognize you've already got De'Aaron Fox, who is a point guard in Sacramento, but the truth is Jaden Ivey is a 6'4" athlete, great body. He can play on or off the ball. You could play De'Aaron Fox and Jaden Ivey together. You would hope that one or both become more reliable three-point shooters before you try to go with a backcourt with those 2 guys playing most minutes together. But my point is that it is possible and totally reasonable. And the truth is, when you're picking, in the top half of the lottery, with few exceptions, I'm always looking for best player available. The only places you might move off of that is if you've already got a franchise point guard like, say, LaMelo Ball or John Morant, who's young and going to be with you for a while. Perhaps then you don't take a point guard with, the fourth pick or the fifth pick or the sixth pick. But Sacramento does not have anybody that should steer you away on its roster from the best available prospect at this point in the draft. And in my opinion, that's Jaden Ivey out of Purdue.
I definitely believe in best player available. I agree with Gary. Jaden Ivey is the best player. And, when you look at this roster construction, my wife and I ran into Buddy Hield a couple of weeks back, and I think this also makes sense because I think Sacramento's going to find a new home for Buddy Hield. He really wanted to get traded to the Lakers. The Lakers, unfortunately, in their case, decided to go trade for Russell Westbrook instead of Buddy Hield, and that didn't work out well. And Westbrook doesn't really complement LeBron's skill set, but Buddy Hield does. So look for Buddy Hield to force his way out. Then you're going to need some depth at the guard spot. You're going to need somebody that can relieve De'Aaron Fox, play with De'Aaron Fox. You need playmakers. And this guy, Jaden Ivey, he's a playmaker. And he can score also at the end of the shot clock, which is critical in the NBA, especially come playoff time.
All right, and then with our 5th overall pick, we're looking at the Detroit Pistons, who are guaranteed a top 7 pick heading into the day. They could have gotten the 1st overall pick, had the best odds out of anybody, tied for the best odds with 3 other teams. But here they are sitting at 5, sort of the consolation prize, Gary, as you take a look at maybe the line of demarcation where the talent does start to drop off. Is this it, and who do they go with?
I do think there's a drop-off between 4 and 5, but I really like the guy that they could get at 5, and that's Keegan Murray out of Iowa. He was a so-so prospect coming out of high school who was mostly a reserve at Iowa as a freshman while Luka Garza was winning National Player of the Year. But he had done enough stuff in that freshman year to get on NBA people's radar. And then he just had an incredible sophomore season, showing that he can do more than just guard multiple positions, at his size, which is what initially got him on NBA people's radars. Being 6'8", 6'9", and being able to switch and guard smaller guys, which is obviously a valuable skill in the modern NBA. He was a scorer this season at Iowa, one of the very best in the country. He could comfortably and confidently shoot it from the perimeter. So he's just got a lot of stuff that looks really translatable to the NBA. Does he have star potential? I'm not sure. At least not as much star potential as the guys I've got going ahead of him. But at number 5, I feel really good about getting a guy who is, perfectly suited for the way basketball is being played at the NBA level right now.
Yeah, the Detroit Pistons, I think they're going to be praying that the Sacramento Kings select Keegan Murray 4 so that they can get their hands and trade and draft Ivy at this spot, because I think Ivy would not only be the best player available, but he would be the better fit. I'm not sure with the rest of this roster how Murray fits with this team. They have different options where the Pistons can land here. But again, if they land with Murray, they'll maneuver some of those other players. Sadiq Bey, obviously is an outstanding young talent. But at the end of the day, this is about Cade Cunningham. Cade Cunningham got off to a slow start last year with the Detroit Pistons, and boy, he came on. He was still my rookie of the year, with all due respect to Scotty Barnes. But this is about Cade Cunningham. If he ascends to the levels where we think he's going to go, it's not going to matter much of who they draft at this position if Cade Cunningham is the player who we all think he's going to be.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.